Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this fine Wednesday morning, right before Pesach. I know everybody's so busy with cleaning up for Pesach, and preparing tons of meals. This year, it's like feeling really the freedom of Pesach compared to last year. So, it's an unbelievable perspective that sometimes it is more restrictive than in previous years, right? Especially for a lot of people. Some people are definitely more open, but it's definitely feels more freedom than last year. And we talked about this in the morning minute. Right? I just want to sort of start off with today with this point because it's an important point to reflect on. And that is that so many times we get complacent with what we are doing, and we sort of get into a groove and just feel that this is always the way it should be because it's always how it was. And even though it wasn't, but even if it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 70 years, right, but we sort of get into that rote of doing things and just believing that things will be in a certain way, excuse me, and we forget. And it's so important, right? It's so important to remember every year and to reflect on what we have and what we don't have. And that's the best way to be able to experience the experience that we're supposed to have, the freedom, the gratitude, and the spiritual growth, because we shouldn't be complacent, because when we are complacent, we don't reflect. And we spoke about that's the idea of the Dayenu to a certain degree. We speak about each individual looking in a positive way. We say, thank you, God, for, killing the firstborn. Just for that would have been enough to recognize what we have and also where we come from. And that's the whole passage that we read that part of the Haggadah that most of us skim through or skip or whatever it is, where we start talking about our forefathers were idol worshippers and so forth, right? We spoke about that in the morning minute yesterday. But why do we do that? Is because we have to remember where we came from, what we had or what we didn't have, to be able to appreciate where we are today and recognize our own personal growth also. So, it's always important to reflect on that. Now, we could always tie this into our lessons. I think this is something also very important for us to do, especially with Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is something that's extremely hard, as we've mentioned before, as we've all personally experienced, right? It's not something that's easy, right? Even someone that is, the most careful with their speech, and all the people on here are extremely organized in their speech and careful and good people and not malicious people, and people that care about other people. But at least I'm talking for myself, but it's a hard thing to control. And as we see the details of the laws of Lashon Hara, right, are unbelievable and have such ramifications that we think this is just normal conversation. It's not anything bad, but it still falls under Lashon Hara. And it's something to constantly reflect on and to say, hey, what was I doing 3 months ago, 6 months ago? We started this class, right after Sukkot, I think it was. We started this, right? So that's about almost 6 months, 5.5 months. How was I speaking? How was I interacting with other people, right? And it's important again to constantly, encourage yourself by saying, look, we've done 134 pages. Right, that's a lot of pages. Okay, not exactly, because the beginning is like acknowledgments and all that, right? But okay, but we've done 38 days, and that's a feat. Once a week, and it's important to reflect on that. I was telling someone the other day, there's a lot of you are familiar with the concept of Daf Yomi. Right? Daf Yomi is learning one page of Talmud every day. And both sides. It's not like reading a book. Oh, I can read a book, a page of a book, and a couple, who knows, 20 minutes, right? Talmud is learning it. There's details. It's not an easy thing to accomplish, right? But it's one page a day, and sometimes they're easier ones, sometimes they're a little harder ones. but it's a mind-boggling thing. We just this past week, right? We finished Tractate Pesachim. And Pesachim deals with primarily the laws of Pesach, which is actually very cool. We finished it right before Passover. It's always a beautiful sign and sort of a kiss on the forehead from God, saying that He's happy with what we're doing. But beside the point, right? Pesachim is 121 pages, double-sided pages. Now, I remember when we started Pesachim, and the previous track dates, and it's similar. There are some smaller ones. The one we're starting now is like 20 pages. It's a lot more feel like it's attainable. Right? But when you open up a book, and it's not a book, it's a sefer, it's a learning thing. 121 pages side by side, two-sided, in-depth learning, complicated stuff, things that not necessarily we've learned beforehand. So how am I going to do this? Right? How am I going to do this? And when you just take one day at a time, just focus on today, focus on today. And then when you get halfway through, wow, look how much I've accomplished. I finished other tractates. That pushes you to allow you to continue to do more. And after 120 days, we finished a tractate with one day at a time. 120 days, I don't have time for that. You just got to try to do one thing at a time. And that's the same thing what we're trying to do over here with the laws of Lashon Hara, and bettering ourselves with our communication, not our service or our connection in that way, but more importantly, the things that are more important, right, is our communication with others, of how we communicate to others. And it's a process, and it's not going to happen overnight. Right? And even us, most people, all the people that are on here are good people and not malicious people, and not people that, are gossipers and people that want to, maliciously hurt anybody. But, right, we are humans, and it's a process, and it takes time. So sort of just want to give all ourselves an encouragement, a pat on the back. It's not easy, staring at my face, once a week over a screen. Right, I'm sure there's a lot of other better things you guys can do, right? But it's a very powerful thing, and and the group that's on here and whoever's listening on Facebook, right? You guys are the core of this class, and I just want to say Yasher Koach, right? Because one thing we know about Pesach is we're supposed to do people think that Yom Kippur is a time that we're supposed to do a spiritual reflection, which is true. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we're supposed to do that. But Pesach, we're also supposed to do that, because Pesach is our spiritual freedom, right? And we're supposed to reflect and say, hey, how I have been, am I really exercising my freedom? Am I taking advantage of the ability to, the free will that God gave me, and exercising that and learning more and attaining more knowledge to be able to allow myself to make the right decision, which is the nucleus of Pesach. And you guys are doing that once a week, and I'm sure more than once a week, but at least with me, right, once a week, you guys are doing that, and you have to give yourselves a pat on the back, and it's doing it in a healthy manner, one day at a time. Not saying, oh, it's crazy. Look at the book. There's how many days? 100 and something days, right? We're just doing once a week. When are we going to finish? You know what? It's not when we're going to finish. It's what we're doing right now. It's what we have accomplished, right? And that's an important lesson that we learned from the Haggadah, right? And we have to take that internally. So first of all, again, yes, shakach all of you for joining us, but more importantly, remember that it's a process. It's not all or nothing, right? It's a slow process, but it's consistency that is extremely important, that you constantly are doing it, right? And you could accomplish anything that way. Okay, let's get into the Sefer. At the end, I'll throw in one more idea for Pesach with the Haggadah, hopefully, and then we'll open up the question and answers at the end, like we always do. So we're on page 134, day 38. That's what we're holding. Okay, so the dilemma is like this. This is an interesting one, right? Your brother, your good friend, right? Your nemesis, probably not, but your brother, a good friend, right, is hot-headed, really. Right? Okay, he is highly intelligent and a hard worker, but he can't hold a job. Right? He cannot hold a job. You tried to help him see how his behavior antagonizes people, but he's not listening. Do you say, this is who he is or who she is, right? Or, no, I'll just focus on his many good points. Or do you ask his chavrusa, his someone that he trusts, someone that he listens to, right? Whom he respects, to speak to him. Right? So do you just say, hey, listen, let's just focus on the good parts. Let's just focus on what's good, and then it is what it is. Or you try to intervene with speaking to someone. So if you notice, the last couple of cases have been situations where we're trying to see if we're allowed to intervene to help someone. Like, yeah, last time was to speak to the person's the person's parents, right, with the kid, right, protecting someone that's looking for a job, right, that the person you think is a tyrant. So everyone is slightly different, if you remember. And this again over here is also, right, because you've spoken to him, right? There are good qualities, right, that you could focus on, and you've tried to do your due diligence. Now the question is, right, you try to get, if you don't mind muting yourself, whoever making that noise, I appreciate it. Or do you go ahead and speak to someone that he respects? All right, not that he doesn't respect you, but you're a sibling, or you're extremely close, and sometimes sometimes you need an outsider, not a complete outsider, someone that's not involved in the daily life, right? Like a brother or a very close friend, but someone that there's still that respect, right? To be able to sort of give that information over. It comes from a different place, right? Someone in the community that he respects, that he has a relationship with, but it's more of a professional kind of relationship. So, and I don't want to get too in detail with that. That's just an important thing to remember, that just because someone doesn't listen to you right away doesn't mean to say that they're not good friends or they don't respect you. It's just sometimes it depends who it's coming from, right? It can make a big difference of the impact. All right, so the question is over here, could you try to have a conversation with someone that that you think would be able to impact this individual, brother, good friend, or sister, whatever it is, right? By letting them know, hey, could you speak to him that he has to really work on his, his personality, his sarcasm, right? He thinks it's funny, but it's not. It really irritates people, and it's not good for his work environment, or whatever it is. Right? So the halacha is like this, right? This is such an important a philosophy besides halacha that one has to realize. Right? The companions, the relatives, right, Hashem put into our lives are there to help us refine our nature. Right? Pointing out flaws that we cannot see in ourselves. It's not only permitted, but it's important to offer constructive criticism or have others offer it. All right, so I want to expand on this a little bit, because it's not just a blanket statement, right? And you have to be a little careful when you say this. The philosophy is 100%. And I want to expand on this a little bit, because I think by expanding on this a little bit, it could give us a little, a little view on the hard people that are in our lives also. We all have people that are easy in our lives, are inspirational, right? Are some good friends, a spouse, a parent, kids that are, really, doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And then we have the hard people in our lives, right? Sometimes it's a spouse, sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's also our kids, sometimes it's a good friend, but you grew up with them and they're very good friends, but they're still hard people, and a neighbor, right? A community member, right, that you might not be the closest to, but still. And so there's a variety of different people that have influences on us in our lives. Right? Some a little more intense, like spouses and children and parents and very, very good friends. And then there's people that sort of out of the outer rim, right? Community members, neighbors, whatever it is, right? Extended family, a cousin, right? That also have influence in our lives. And some of them are seeming good influence, or easy, let's rephrase it, easy influences, and some are harder, right? Relationships. And sometimes we wonder, why did God give us, right, these hard relationships, right? These hard people to deal with, right? If it's a neighbor, it's a community member, spouse, if it's a child, right? Whatever it is, right? Why did he give us these hard people? It's not, we don't want to cut them off, right? It's not like that. It's not we're just going to ignore them, right? They're in our lives and we want it to stay that way, but it's hard. Why? And this idea is such an important idea that we just read now. He's using it for a different context, and we're going to get back to that in a minute. But I just want to expand on this for a minute. Everything, every person, every situation that God puts into our lives are there for us to grow. So if there's a hard community member, maybe it's there to help you grow on your ability to restrain yourself and to be able to be tolerant, right? To be able to be more charming to people that are harder for you. That's something that God wants you to work on. Maybe it's to be able to, for you to be able to look past certain people's things and focus on the positive of them, right? Whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's more of a positive by them being a good influence, and means to say you want to, be like them, right? A community member that's really hardworking and a person that learns and person that's an honest business person, and he's kaveh to the Torah, he sets time for Torah, and he gives charity. It's just so it's someone to emulate, someone to try to learn from, right? Or a parent, or a grandparent, or even sometimes our children, right? Look how hard they're working to learn in their studies, and they're refined kids. And sometimes we have to also learn from our kids. So there's always an influence of something that we could learn from, something that we could grow from. And we have to always look at something as an opportunity. We have to look at an opportunity. Now you're going to say, what happens if something's really a bad? So sometimes you have to cut that relationship, right? And that's part of what you're supposed to learn from. Sometimes you also have to cut a relationship, right? But that's not what we're talking about right now. And we're talking about people that you're going to keep in your lives. So there's always something to grow from. Even those people that are nagging you, right? Even that very close friend or neighbor, right? Or child that's hard, community member, there's something to learn from, something to grow from. And we have to, switch our view, our glasses, our way of looking at it, right? Our mindset, and say, how can I grow from this situation? What does God want me to learn from this? How am I supposed to become a better person through this? And once we do that, right, our whole attitude to the person, our whole relationship to the person changes. It'll be so much better because you're able to tolerate it, right? It's like, why do I need that, right? Why do I need that neighbor that constantly, puts the garbage? They're nice people and whatever, right? And we say hello, and if they're non-Jewish neighbors, they're good to have next to. They'll come over and turn off our lights on Shabbos and whatever it is, according to the way you're allowed to do it on Shabbos, right? I don't want to get into that complicated halacha, right? But they're nice people, but they always, put their garbage in front of your house, right? Or they have their things that they're sticklers to, right? And there's certain things that tick them off, and you just want to stay away, or a friend, or whatever it is, because there's something for you to grow from, something that you have to look inside and say, how am I going to change and become a better person through overcoming this? And then there's those positive role models. And this is something so important to reflect on, right? This is definitely going to be something that will allow you to also stop talking about people, right? That's also something important to remember, right? Having an attitude change. But this is something that we have to realize that is part of how God wants us, Hashem wants us to grow. Now you're going to say, 1 second, right? I bought this house here, right? Or I was born to certain parents, right? Or I had to move to a certain city because of medical reason, whatever it is. That's out of my control. Right? So God's controlling that. Where's my free will? Right? Where's my free will? And the answer is, right? And we're saying this in a very, Cliff Note version, right? But the answer is that free will is not necessarily the situations that you're in. There could be situations that you are in that are out of your control. Right? The example I always give, I think most of you know my sister Batya, right? It's out of her control that she's physically handicapped. There's nothing she can do about it. Right? Yes, she's going to therapy and this and that, but it's been 35 years, I think she's 35, right? But that's out of her control. That's how God made her. Doesn't mean to say that God took away her free will. This is what God wants her to work on. Now, why? I don't know, right? And when we talk, that's not necessarily what I will tell her right away, right? Or someone that's a stranger to her, right? I'm a sibling, it's different. We have a very deep relationship. But from the perspective, that's what God wants her to work on with those challenges. Now, how she reacts to that, what she does with that, that's her free will. That's her free will. And that's the same thing with us. Right? The situations that we're put in, right, are not necessarily our choices. So if you are, the only house that became available is next to an individual, and sort of you're forced into a corner, right? Yes, theoretically, maybe you could, live in your car, right? So you could theoretically make a choice, but it's not really a choice, right? And so the only house that became available is next to that person, right? Or you were born to certain parents, right? Yes, you have the free will to disavow yourself from your parents if one wants to, God forbid. That's your choice of how you're reacting to the situation that God put you. So that's where your free will works. And this ties in directly, right, to speaking also. Because sometimes you can say, wow, I just saw this and I feel like I have to say it. God's taking away my free will. I shouldn't have seen it. No, God is testing you. He made you hear or see something, right, to see if you're going to be able to control yourself. How are you going to react? What are you going to be careful with the way you're presenting the information that you want to give over, right? For example, this case. So what are we saying? We're saying you should say something, but now you have to know how to say it. You have to make sure that you speak to that person and say, "Hey, listen, I know my brother. He really respects you, and my brother's really an awesome guy. But he has a little things that have been, affecting him being able to get some work. I was hoping that you could, speak to him and give him encouragement, to be able to, overcome those challenges because he really respects you." Right? That's a good way of saying it. Or you could go and say, "Listen, my brother's just such a failure. Right? He really needs help. Right? And I know he respects you. I'm hoping that you could help him out. He's just antagonizing. He's just sarcastic all the time, and it's not funny. And he thinks he's funny." You hear the two different ways that I just presented the information. So even when we are allowed to say something, it's up to us to decide how we present it. So God put you in this situation that you are now responsible to help your brother out or your good friend, whatever it is. But now how are you going to present the information? That's up to you. That's your free will. Right? And this is our core concept of freedom. Right? It's right before Pesach, so we're going to tie everything into Pesach. Right? When we are talking about the freedom, we spoke about this in the Lunch and Learn, right? For those that were there, the idea of freedom is not necessarily, yes, we were physically free, but it's not necessarily the holiday for, the cry of social freedom and whatever it is. It's an important to a certain degree with the confines of fitting with the Torah, and I don't want to get into that right now. Right? But what it is, it's a spiritual freedom. Right? When we are celebrating Pesach, we're celebrating the freedom that God gave us to make a choice. The freedom to be able to choose. Because what is a slave? A slave is someone that's not able to make his own choices. That's what a slave is. A slave is someone that does not, he has to do whatever the master tells him. He could think what he wants, but his actions or what he does or what he says is controlled by his master. And that's the true freedom that the true freedom that the Jewish people received from God. And was the ability to make their own choices. God allowed them to make their own choices. right? There was consequences, there was reward, but from the second they left Egypt, right, at 10 days later when they're at the splitting of the sea, right, they started complaining. God said, hey, you have the choice how to react to this. Right? I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to split the sea without you guys initiating it. Right? You start going, start believing. Even right then, God gave us the choice. They could have turned around. Right? They could have said, we don't believe in this. God gave them the opportunities to transgress at Mount Sinai. They did the sin of the golden calf. God gave them the opportunity to choose their own way. Yes, there's danger in that because you could choose the wrong one. But that's your choice. But there's great reward if you choose the right way. Now you have to learn, you have to study, you have to have influences. But that's the freedom that we receive. The freedom that we received, yes, is the physical freedom, but so many times we are physically free, but we're spiritually not free. How many times do we say our hands are tied behind our back? How many times do we feel that we can't really make a decision what we really want in our spiritual growth, if it's taking something to the next level, because we feel that we're being tied down by relatives or whatever. And again, I'm not judging anybody, God forbid, but it's a time to reflect, as we said beforehand. How many times do we really feel that we have the ability to control our own spiritual freedom? This is what Pesach is about. It has to be done in a smart way. But God puts you in a situation to be able to make choices. And it's the same thing over here. In this case, it's a choice of how to say over what you're allowed to say. How are you going to present it? And Lashon Hara in general. Is it an opportunity to choose how you're going to speak, how you're going to react, and what is your intentions? Even your thought, you're in control of. You could manipulate your thought and say, no, I'm going to teach myself how to think positive. I'm going to teach myself how to think in a positive way. That's what I'm going to teach myself, right? Because I want to be able to, and I want to be able to make sure, right, that I'm exercising my freedom in a positive way, right? That's what I want to make sure. I don't want to fall prey to a negative way of looking at something, right? I don't want to be the person that is going to fail, right? I don't want to be the person that's going to fail in the way that I connect to something. If you turn the page to 137 for a second, all right, the Ralbag, we mentioned him a couple of weeks ago, all right, he gave a different idea. He gives another idea which fits a little bit into what we're talking about. He says like this. He says, we're all in, as my father once told me, the best tool of education is realizing that you're in sales. Right? We're all in sales. We're all in sales, right? We might not be, have an anti-shake case and walking around, flying around and with products in our anti-shake case. Right? I guess that's like the old version of being in sale. Now it's on your laptop, right? But we're all in sales. And, when you look at advertisements, you don't see, when they're trying to sell the latest Acura or a car or whatever it is, right? You don't see people fighting and bickering in the car, right? You see a family that's all friendly and great and it's the best experience, right? Or, if they're trying to sell a product, whatever it is, it's always a positive experience, right? Because that sells. And it's contagious, and people want to have that positive experience, and therefore you're portraying that driving this car is going to take away all your trouble, and doesn't say, doesn't show pictures of people trying to figure out how to make the payments, right, or things like that, right? Because that doesn't sell. Selling is trying to create a positive environment, and that's why, right, 90% of the advertisement is people looking happy, right? Things are going well. It's the same thing, says the Ralbag. Now, the Ralbag didn't talk about, car sales, just FYI, right? As we mentioned, the Ralbag lived around the 1200s. Right? But the Ralbag does say that same marketing strategy works for selling people on positive change in their lives. The Ralbag states that the first step is to right? Two of the benefits once a person begins to envision what life will be like after the change. He's more willing to undertake the difficulties involved in making the change. His desire, his desire to attain those benefits will to those benefits will decrease the pain, decrease the pain involved. Right? That's what the Rambam says. And my friends, this is what we're talking about. The more you start looking at in a way of positive, even in your brain, you have to start convincing yourself, realizing yourself that you'll be a happier person, you'll be a better person, you'll be a more respectful person. You're going to build your relationship with God when you're able to control the narrative by being more positive, by looking things in a positive way, not always looking for the negative people, not always needing to, to talk in a negative way. And then it's going to influence your actions. It's going to influence your actions. You're going to start seeing, and you're going to start noticing, and I'm sure, I'm positive that all of you, right, have already sensed this, right? I have no doubt in my mind that all of you already have sensed this when you're in conversation with other people. It's, you cringe a little bit. We shouldn't really be talking about that, right? Or you start reflecting on yourself when you want to give over a piece of information. And each one of us are on different levels, but we've been learning this for almost 6 months. And it has made an influence on all of you, I promise you. I know it, right? But you all have to notice that. Realize that this positive thing, it's contagious in the positive way. But we are in control. Now the question is, what are you going to do? You're going to have that feeling in a conversation. Are you going to do something positive or not? Now, why did God put me in that situation? That's exercising your free will. That's what Pesach is all about, right? And that's something very important to reflect on, to remember. Any questions? We said a lot of information before we move on to the next day. Any questions?
Rabbi?
Yes.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment. Isn't the word Pesach also connected to that?
Okay, very good, excellent. So we spoke about that in the lunch to learn, right? That Pesach, right, is the Arizal and others point out that Pesach is made up of really two words: peh, mouth, sach, open. Right, the ability to open up our mouth. And the commentary says because the ultimate freedom is we usually exercise our will, right, to others or convey it through our mouth, to be able to speak our mind, right? The First Amendment is the freedom of speech, right? Is a sign of freedom, a sign of making choices, is the ability to articulate those choices, right? So Pesach, very good. Thank you for reminding me. We spoke about that. Right? Is that I have the ability to, right, speak my mind, right? Now we're in control now of that. Right? And that's where the laws of Lashon Hara come in. Very good, right? But that's what Pesach is about. And is, sort of to build off on that, right? Is if you notice, right? Pesach is a holiday that is surrounded of speech, right? And a mitzvah, right? I think I spoke about this last week in the Morning Minute, right? Good review for all of you. I'm sure it's a review, right? But it's I'm just kidding. But it's we spoke about this. If you notice, no other holiday do we have a mitzvah of speech. We have a lot of prayer, right? And yes, one is obligated to pray every day, right? But it's not a direct mitzvah of the day. Even Yom Kippur, right? There's 4 things on Yom Kippur: not to eat, right? Not to have a marital relation, right? Not to wear leather, right? And not to anoint oneself, right, with oils and things like that, right? And I don't want to get sidetracked on that, right? The famous one is not to eat, right? But there's no direct mitzvah of praying all day. You're going to say, so why are we in synagogue all day? It's because it's something we want to do. We want to connect to the spirituality of the day. We want to be able to break through the doors of heaven and to plead our case. But it's not a direct mitzvah of speech. Pesach, there's eating the matzah. And there's a mitzvah. The Torah says, if you got it, you should speak. You should tell your son, right? Tell your children, and that's speech. There's a direct mitzvah of talking on Pesach. We Jews do a very good job of talking, right? But it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. Therefore, we have the Manashtana. Therefore, the main part of the Seder is called, right? Magid, which means to lahagid, to say over, right? Even the mitzvah is called Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, to say over the story of Mitzrayim, is the ability to be able to utilize our speech for something positive and to reinforce our core beliefs of our existence, our nationhood, and that God is the one that is in control of the world. Right? What are we saying? We're speaking over the miracles that God did. Right? Well, why does he do it now? He does miracles for us all the time, but he doesn't just have to go ahead and show and do that all the time, because then it'll take away part of our free will. And I don't want to get sidetracked on that. Right? But we see the ability of speech, and the Pesach Seder is surrounded around that. And therefore, if people want to sit around the couch and watch a movie about the 10 Commandments, or first of all, it's probably not the correct narrative, right? It's a movie, right? But besides the point, they want to sit down around the couch and and play a game about Pesach and make a play. It's nice, but the mitzvah is to speak and to have a conversation and to communicate and to say over. That's the mitzvah, because that is our ability. That's freedom, and that is freedom and our ability to make choices. That's the way to see that someone has true freedom, is the ability to voice their opinion. And that's what God gave us on Pesach. Very good, Emily. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so let's move on to the next day. All right, let's try to get another day in here. It's page 136, day 39. All right, so this is an interesting case, and this can be played out in many different ways. Right, the scenario that they have over here is one way of looking at it. Right, and let's talk about this. It's a scenario where someone that you respect, someone that's refined nature, someone that's a good person, right? They don't typically, nag you, don't typically, get into your business, right? Or chew you out, right? And they were sort of a little out of character, right? About something that they did. They're a little out of character about something that now you want to, tell someone that was involved in or is affected by that out of character that happened. So the scenario that they choose, and again, this could play out in many different ways in our lives, right? People that we respect, a rabbi, a confidant, a spouse, whatever it is, whoever the scenario will work, right? But the idea is, the criteria that I gave you. The case that they have over here is your father-in-law, right? But your father-in-law, a man with the refined nature and positive attitude, was walking with you to shul on Shabbos when he began to, right, chastise you about the way you're raising your children, right? Chewing you out, right? How you're raising your children. He seemed agitated, even called you, right, a parenting method lazy, right? Parenting method lazy, right? And you just don't educate your kids properly. You're too lenient on them, and blah, 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 and all that stuff, right? And, that's out of his nature. It's not typically, it sort of came out of the blue. You're shocked, and it's out of his nature, right? So you want to tell your wife about the conversation, right, and get her to intervene with her father, right? Which is not always the healthiest thing anyways, right? It depends if you're like newly married or whatever it is, but it's not always healthy. Just a side point for marital advice, right? Not that I am worthy of giving, but some marital advice, right? It's not always the healthiest thing to get your spouse, whoever that is, involved in a conflict that you might have with her siblings or parents, because then you're putting your spouse, right, in a very uncomfortable predicament of, on one hand, it's her husband or wife, right? Either her husband or his wife, right? Or it's siblings, right? Or parents, right? So it's an uncomfortable predicament unless it really needs to be dealt with. It's something that is really a point that it's affecting a lot of things. But if it's just a little scrimmage, a little thing that you had, or a little uncomfortable, sometimes it's better just to eat it up, right? Because you can create bigger problems, and it's not right a lot of times to really putting the spouse in an uncomfortable position to put them in the middle of this. So just on a side note, that's not the point over here, right? But on a side note, right? So let's say this is parenting and things like that, and so that affects both of them, right? It affects her also. It's not just it's parenting should be a parents, a couple's way of doing it, not one parent. It should be a joint effort, so it's affecting the spouse over here also. So might feel that it's important to say something, right? So should he say something? Should he say something about what happened? Right. So as I said, this is a very important. Every detail over here is so important. In this case, they portrayed the father-in-law, right, as a refined person. They portrayed the father-in-law as a nice person, right? They portrayed the father-in-law as not a meddling kind of person, right? So this was out of character of what happened, right? So in a different situation, it could be different, right? And this is why it's so important we're talking about, it's not, this case is not, say now every case where you're dealing with your father-in-law or something similar. You have to look at all the fine details, right? So when someone acts out of character, right, we must try to understand what happened and see it in a positive light. If it is clear that the person really did speak or act incorrectly, we have to assume that he or she realized it and immediately regretted it. Speaking to someone else about the incident is not considered to'alas, it is simply lashon hara, right? And therefore, that's what they're trying to bring out a rule, right? The scenario of the case is just to bring out a rule, right? If you think that the person was out of character in the actions that they did or the things they said to you, right, whatever it is, right, it was just not the way that that's not who they are, right? And don't forget, we all are humans and we all have challenges, right? And there's no perfect person in the world, right? Because that's an angel, right? So we all have our ups and downs, right? But right, generally, this is not the way this person acts, right? Let's say you saw at Kiddush that they were grabbing the food and rushing to the table, and that's not how they are, right? So I don't know, maybe they had a weird morning, right, or whatever it is, right? Or a scenario like this where they said something, right? Or you're out somewhere and you see them doing something that's seemingly totally out of their character, right? If it's something that's against halacha, right, or behaving in a way that's not proper, which is also against halacha, right? But whatever it is, right? So if you know that this is not really the way that this person deals with, right? So then that is lashon hara, right? This is where we come into al tadin chavercha, right? Don't judge your friend, right? So we spoke about this in the beginning that you can't judge your friend. But at the same time, you have to protect yourself, and you see something happening, whatever it is, and sort of having to, try to balance that. And this is a scenario where the Talmud tells us that if you see a tzaddik, a righteous person, and a tzaddik, a righteous person doesn't mean to be someone with a long white beard, right, or black beard, right, or someone that's knows Kabbalah and all that stuff, right? A righteous person means to say that someone in their thing that you see, right? That they're either a refined person, that they keep the mitzvahs, that they're wherever they're holding, that's something that they're growing in and they're doing, right? Means to say someone that is not, you don't think that this person typically will do something like this, right? That's what it's referring to in this scenario. And the Talmud says that if you see a tzaddik, a righteous person, doing something, right, at night, right, that's against the Torah, right, you shouldn't say anything and you shouldn't judge him, because you should assume that by the next day he did tshuva, right? He did tshuva, he repented, right? He asked God for forgiveness. He's working on changing his ways. He's working on putting protocols in himself, right? Because in essence, he's someone that's not his way of doing things. It's not a character trait. It's not who he is. Right? He or she, because of his growth, because of whatever it is, his way of working on himself, right? And that's where they're building. This is where it's coming from. It's the same thing if someone does something and or says something. Sometimes that was a little weird. That was a little strange, right? He probably regrets what he said or what she said or what she did, right? Because that's just not who that person is. Now, if you see this, repeating itself, so then maybe this person now has changed, right? And that's another scenario, another case, And that sometimes unfortunately happens. One should not rely on themselves until the day they die. And I said the Talmud, what does that mean? What's King Solomon saying? It means to say that one should never be complacent with their spirituality. Say, I've reached a good place. No, we always have to constantly work on ourselves, because the evil inclination, right, the Yetzer Hara, could make a spiral, right, all the way down and lose that status, God forbid. And so we shouldn't rely on oneself, and say, I'm in a good place, that's his cruise. But from our perspective, unless we see that this is something that's repeating itself all the time, right, we should assume for sure the first or second time that the person had regret. And then that's lashon hara. That's not toalas. That's not beneficial to anything, right? And that's an important thing to always reflect on and to remember, right? Because there's so many times that this is what we're talking about. There's so many times that we notice, well, oh my gosh, did you know what that person did, right? Oh my God, that's where the juicy information comes, right? The real lashon hara is, when we sort of something novel, something different, if it's about, Chaim Yankel, that, Chaim Yankel did, he ate a cheeseburger. Well, Chaim Yankel eats cheeseburgers all the time, right? It's a terrible thing, right? But Chaim Yankel eats cheeseburgers all the time, so we have to work on trying to educate him, but it's not going to spread, right? I'm not saying you're allowed to do that, but you're going to have less of a taiva, desire to speak about that, because that's something that's known, or whatever it is. That's something else. Someone that talks in shul during davening, or whatever it is, right? So your neighbor, right? Everybody knows about what your neighbor does, and it's just common knowledge, and it's a terrible thing. But it's not. There's no excitement to talk about that. Where's the real excitement? Where's the real tzus? The taiva, the desire of lashon hara, is where it's something different, something unique, something special. Oh my gosh, how can this person do it? Right? It goes against this person, whoever it is, and that is where it is most likely lashon hara. Because that's what we're speaking today. The guy probably had charata. The guy probably repented and changed his ways, and he felt bad, and he's changing his ways, because that's not who he is. And now when he's speaking about it, there is no toelis at all. There's no way of trying to streamline this and say this is for a benefit, because the person is not going to likely repeat this, and there's no reason to do that. So this is something very important to reflect on. A, our interaction with people, and B, right? Also, it's an encouragement for ourselves. Just because we one time failed or did something that's against where we are, where everyone's holding, but where we are in our spiritual growth, don't give up and don't say, oh my gosh, I don't know how I did that, and then forget about everything. We all go through our ups and downs, right? The challenge is, as we started off in today, our freedom of Pesach, right, is to say, I'm not going to let that knock me down. I have the freedom to overcome that. I have the freedom to make my own choices, and I'm going to repent on that, and I'm going to strengthen myself to make sure that I, take more steps in my spiritual growth. Just one more idea, and we're going to tie this into Pesach, and then I'll take questions and answers. There's one more idea from the Seder, and I'm sure you've heard this before, right? But I think it's so important, and I always like crediting my mother for this Dvar Torah, right? I'm sure I've seen this other places, but I remember hearing this from my mother at the Pesach Seder from being a little kid, right? I think she was trying to tell us something, right? But the four sons, right? So the everybody asks that the first son, the Chacham, the wise son, and the Rasha, the evil son, right? If you look at the words that they're saying, the question they ask, the words are basically the same. They're almost the same. What's this work for you? And the Chacham, the wise son, we speak about the current Pesach, and we encourage him, and we say, he's wise, he's great. And in the Rasha, we're knocking out his teeth, right? I'm sure the dentists are all happy, right? But we're knocking out our teeth. We're if you ordered there, you wouldn't have been redeemed, right? Open up the Haggadah, you'll see there's not much difference between the wording of the Chacham and the Rasha. And everybody asks, why is one considered a Chacham, the wise son, and one's considered the Rasha, the evil son? And there's many different answers, right? But I remember mother always says, right? I remember at the Seder, as a little kid, And I've seen other people say this also, right? That the difference in between the Chacham and the Rasha is not in the words that they say, but it's how they say it and the meaning behind what they're saying. Right? The Chacham, you can say the same words, and you could be a Chacham or a Rasha. The Chacham is looking for knowledge. His tone of voice, I remember he always says, his tone of voice, right? His tone of voice is of a question, right? Hey, I'm very curious. What are we doing? And it's a misconception. A Chacham doesn't mean to say righteous person, right? A Chacham means to say someone that is seeking knowledge. It doesn't make a difference where they're holding in life, right? It could be the most wisest people, like the story afterwards, the great rabbis that, studied all night, Pesach nights, learning about this Pesach Seder, or the Chacham could be someone that's a beginner and just learning about Pesach for the first time. It doesn't make a difference where you're holding, right? It doesn't say a tzaddik, it says a Chacham, a wise person, because a wise person is always seeking more knowledge, right? A wise person is always trying to enhance their ability to really choose and make their free will, to have a true free will, to be able to make the proper choice. And their question is in a seeking and trying to understand, right? So that's a Chacham. The Rasha could say the same thing, but he says it in an antagonizing way. He says it in a mocking way. Right? You could ask him, "Oh, what's all this for you?" And you can say, "Hey, I'm curious. What is all this? What are we doing?" You hear the difference? There's such a difference in the way that one presents their voice. All right. So therefore, a Rasha, again, you could be a learned person, you could be a non-learned person, you could be doing them. A Rasha is someone that is not looking for an answer. He just wants to mock the information. It's his tone of voice. It's the way he's presenting the information. What is all this? Means to say that he doesn't care. He doesn't care to exercise his ability of free will to really get knowledge to be able to make a choice. And therefore, we said if he would have been there, he wouldn't have been freed. Means to say because the whole purpose of the freedom of Exodus of Egypt, yes, it's our physical, but the real purpose is to allow us to be able to have spiritual freedom, to go and get the Torah and to be able to learn and to be able to make our choices. But we could only do that by studying. And you could only study properly if you ask the proper questions and you ask questions to be able to understand more information and to be able to seek knowledge and not to make fun of the knowledge. So therefore when we say the Chacham, the Rasha, if you would have been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed, to say because your whole attitude is against the whole purpose of the freedom of Egypt. The whole purpose of the freedom of Egypt was to be able to give us the free will, to be able to ask questions in a way of seeking knowledge. Therefore, you wouldn't have been redeemed. And why do we knock out his teeth? Because it's a metaphor. The teeth is the way we make sound. And someone that doesn't have any teeth, they sound very funny. They can't really make words. I don't know why. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. I have no clue. But right, our ability to truly form our words and to articulate ourselves is because we have teeth. And therefore, we knock out his teeth and say, because you're not utilizing your teeth. You're not exercising your freedom. You're mocking things. And that's not why God gave us. We're trying to remind them that they're not using their teeth the right way. My friends, that is the true purpose of Pesach. And our ability to be able to be a chacham, seek knowledge, ask the questions, right? Not be embarrassed of asking a question. I get to Rabbi, I'm embarrassed of asking this question. It's probably a stupid question. No, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And if you don't know something, that means it's a good question for you. Ask it. Being able to acquire more knowledge, being able to build your knowledge in your head to be able for then you be able to make the decision. And we are confident in our knowledge. We are very confident. We don't shy away from sharing our knowledge. We don't shy away from people asking questions because we are confident that Torah and the knowledge that God gave us is true. And that if someone truly is seeking knowledge and not controlled by their desires, but really seeking knowledge, will see what is right and wrong and will make the right choice. And we're not scared. We're not scared. Right? And that is the true freedom that we have. And again, it ties into Lashon Hara, the ability of speech. We have to make sure that when we speak, right, we speak with a proper way, with a refined way. And when we see someone doing something, if it's not out of their character trait, it's our freedom to believe that they repented and they changed the way and not say something. My blessing to all of us is that we should be able to have an enjoyable Pesach, a chag kosher v'sameach, a holiday that's kosher and a simcha and a happy chag. All right, but not more importantly, but as importantly, utilize the energy of the day. It's more than a day, the week, but the energy of Pesach, of our ability of freedom, right? But the true freedom that God gave us, right? Because so many times we are free to do physically what we want, but we're so enchained in our way of life, right? In our true ability to make change and to really exercise our true freedom of choosing, because we're told we have to do this and we're said we have to do that. We have to choose, and wherever one's holding, right, they have to reflect and learn and acquire more knowledge. And if they don't have enough information about something, don't just make an assumption that that's how it is. Learn more about it, study more about it, because that's really the energy of the holiday of Pesach. So wishing you all again a beautiful Seder, a beautiful Pesach. Remind yourselves, right, how Pesach was last year, and realize that we truly have our freedom, right? And when we do that, right, we're able to have our level of gratitude will jump, right, 10-fold, and really truly appreciate what God has given us. Wishing you all a beautiful day and a happy Pesach.